Hi there, and welcome back to our next video for the Brooklyn Connected Quilt-Along. I hope you've all been having a lot of fun putting your blocks together, and now this video is about putting all your blocks together into the larger quilt top. So I went ahead and pieced some blocks. So you can see here, these are the blocks if you're doing ruler cut blocks and you want a more precise version of your quilt top. And then here we have my improv pieced blocks, and this isn't going to be precise at all, which I love. It's going to all be just improv cut and pieced together for the whole quilt top. So stay tuned and let's do some cutting and piecing. All right, so I have squared up 4 blocks, and these are the blocks that I cut using my ruler. So this is the part where we're just going to start piecing them together. Now I'm just using 4 blocks here as an example, but you're going to piece row by row and then piece your rows together. So for instance, let's call this one row. You would piece all 4 of these together, you would piece 4 more, and then you would start piecing the rows to each other. But we are just going to, for the sake of this example, we're just going to do these 4. So I'll piece these 2 together, then I'll piece these together, and then I'll piece these 2 together. And you can do this in a variety of ways. If you're using ruler cut blocks like these and you want everything to line up perfectly, then I'm going to suggest that you do nested seams, and I'll demonstrate that later on in the video. However, in this case, I took a couple of my improv blocks and I went ahead and squared them up to the same size as these ruler cut blocks. And that's another way to do this quilt as well. You could just do all your improv blocks, but then square them up to all the same size. And in that case, it's maybe not as important for you to make sure that all of this lines up perfectly, because as you can see, it doesn't really, like if this were not to line up perfectly, it doesn't really affect the overall pattern. And in fact, it kind of looks cool when it's a little offset. Now that's going to mean when you get your whole quilt done, you're going to need to trim off some more edges than you might have needed to trim if everything were lining up perfectly. So in that case, you don't need to worry about nested seams or making sure everything lines up. And that's actually a really nice thing about this quilt, is that the level of precision you want to take is up to you. Because like I said here, this actually looks kind of cool in my eyes. And so I would actually prefer a little less precise piecing when I'm putting my quilt top together, because I think it actually gives a more interesting pattern overall. Anyway, let's go to the sewing machine and start sewing these together. All right, so now it's time to start putting these blocks together. For those of you who are experienced with this is not going to be anything new. We're just going to line these blocks up. And once again, we're doing 1/4 inch seams. So do whatever you need to do on your machine to make sure that you're doing a 1/4 inch seam. No need to backstitch. And we're just piecing the blocks together. Voila. Let's go ahead and do these. All right, and so that's that one. So now, what I normally do is I would piece an entire row, all my rows at once. And then I'd have all my separate rows. And then I would go to the ironing board and I would press my seams. And if I'm going to nest my seams, I would just make sure that one row has all the seams pointing one way, and then the next row would have all the seams pointing the opposite way. And you'll see why when I do that and press and nest my seams together. However, if you're not nesting seams, then you could choose to press your seams open to eliminate some of this bulk because there's a lot more fabric now in this seam. So you could press it open. You could just press everything to one side, whatever seems natural. Like this block, the seam is kind of naturally going in this direction. So you could just do that, and that way your fabric's not being manipulated as much. It's totally up to you. So let's go press the seams, and then I will come back and show you how I'm nesting these. Okay, so I just pressed my seams. I didn't do a demo of that because it's pretty easy, and it's the same way I pressed my seams for the individual blocks. But I did go ahead and do this row, the seam I pressed this way, and this row, the seam I pressed this way. And that way I'm going to be able to nest them when I sew them together. So let's flip them back over. And so I don't use pins when I'm nesting because I don't think it's necessary. But if you want, you could use a pin. So all you want to make sure you're doing is you're going to be able to feel when these are lined up perfectly because the seams are pressed in opposite directions. So you could put a pin right in this seam and then sew right up to that pin, take the pin out, and then keep sewing. And that should keep it really well lined up. However, you don't need the pin. So just nest your seam, line up your block, and then as we get closer, we're just going to make sure that the seam stays nested. So I do some, and you again, you're just going to be able to feel how that links together. And then I just hold on to that seam until I sew over it. And then I keep going. And I would do that. And if you're continuing on, you just do the same thing. You sew along. You nest your seam and hold on to it. And then keep going. And so then when you open it up, you have a perfectly lined up seam with your blocks. So that's the beauty of nested seams if you want that precision piecing for this quilt top. All right, so now I'm going to demonstrate piecing my improv pieced blocks. For piecing together my improv blocks, I'm going to do more improv piecing. So I just want to show you it's the same technique we learned for the individual blocks, but now we're going to do them together. And instead of placing an entire block over an entire block, we're just going to place some edges over each other. And then we're going to do our cutting. And as you can see, I did not square up these blocks because I wanted to leave some room for this improv piecing to put them together. Let's go ahead and do some cutting. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to just make a cut. And then these are going to be pieced together. Because the improv piecing gets a little trickier the bigger the strips and rows are, I'm probably going to stick to blocks of 4. So I'll go ahead. Let's cut that one. So I would go ahead and piece these two together, and then I would layer this on top and do a cut here, and then piece this block together. And then I would do that in groups of 4 for my entire quilt top, and then I would start doing more improv piecing and cutting together. All right, let's go to the machine. And so here's my pieced improv blocks, my first 4. And you can see we've got some nice curves. I'm not worried about lining these up because I want that off look for them. And I think as the quilt top gets bigger and bigger, it's going to look really cool that way. Have a lot of movement. This quilt's going to have a lot of movement. You can already see it. And so that's pretty much it. Just start piecing all of your blocks together in whatever method you prefer. And before you know it, you're going to have an entire quilt top. And then once that's put together, you can either decide to quilt it yourself, or you can send it out to a professional quilter. I'm sure there are plenty of quilters out there who would be happy to get some work in these times. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what everyone has been doing. Please post your pictures, post your progress, use the hashtag Brooklyn Connected QAL, and post them on Instagram, post them on Facebook. Be sure to follow the Brooklyn Quilters Guild on Instagram and join their page on Facebook so that you can see everyone else's progress. And also feel free to leave comments, as always, questions, advice. As I keep saying, this is all about staying connected. Even though we're all in our homes, we're all self-isolating, self-quarantining, social distancing, which is super important. And so this is a really great way, thanks to technology, to be able to stay connected as a quilting community. If you're a beginner, it's a great way to pick up a new skill and craft that maybe you'd never thought to try before, and a nice productive way to spend your time at home when you're not commuting or out having fun with friends in public places, which we can no longer do for at least the time being. So please, let's all stay connected. Let's give each other support, advice, and post your pictures, and let's see what everyone creates. I cannot wait to see it. It's been wonderful sharing this experience with you, and I will definitely be posting pics of my progress, so be sure to follow me if you want to see that, or you can just follow the hashtag Brooklyn Connected QAL, and you'll be able to see my pics there. All right, it's been great. Enjoy. Happy quilting, happy crafting, happy making.